Starting today on EU1, Monday the 10th of March, we will be having a new updated Matchmaker. Now, I'm not too sure when they're putting this into the live server on EU1, but they said on Reddit that it would be today. So what is actually happening with the Matchmaker? Well, over the years, they've realized that it's not exactly how they've wanted it. And they have 3 different principles and cores to the Matchmaker. They have balanced battles, engagements and battle variety, and speed and efficiency. These are the 3 pillars that form the Matchmaker. You need to have a balanced battle, otherwise you get one-sided games, and we do have one-sided games a lot. And I don't think that the Matchmaker is 100% to blame for this, but we'll move on to that a bit later on. Engagement and battle variety, nobody wants to have the same kind of tank against the same kind of tank all the time. There needs to be variety in the game. There's no use having, say, 10 DBVs per side when there's going to be nothing else going on the map, if that's the case. And I've been saying for a while now that the amount of tank destroyers and light tanks really is an issue, especially to the engagement and variety, because there's some maps where the amount of light tanks and tank destroyers, you just can't move. You could sometimes have 7 TDs on each side, and what are you meant to do with that? There's no way of actually pushing a flank because everybody's camped at the back, and there's no way of actually progressing the battle sometimes because unless someone makes a mistake, you're just going to sit there in a stalemate. And as for the amount of light tanks, there's no point having 4 light tanks on Himmelsdorf, for example. That just invites bad gameplay overall. Speed and efficiency, overall on the EU server, this is already very, very good. And the problem is that it's so good, in fact, that it feels like they've gone for speed and efficiency at the detriment of quality battles sometimes. On EU, it's actually very rare that you'll see a queue time that is above maybe 5 to 15 seconds unless you're playing artillery. On other servers, I know that is an issue because there is less population, and unfortunately, there isn't really too much that we can do about that, although Wargaming has said that no matter the time of day, this will hopefully help this out, but we'll have to see about that because I don't really see how you can get into games quickly if there's nobody actually playing the game. They then go on to say that they are going to completely rebuild the Matchmaker core from the ground up, and even the smallest adjustments require significant time, which is very true. You try and change one thing, and then sometimes that's then a knock-on effect to something else. So I am well aware that these changes, and they've said that it's going to take a few months to kind of iron it all out, will take a while to actually perfect, and hopefully they can perfect it in the end. So what are the features that are going to be implemented? Improved role balance to start things off with. This is something that I've been asking for a very, very long time. There is no point of matching up a mouse against a 50B, and they even use this example here. In the current state of World of Tanks, the mouse can be matched up against a 50B, and they can be on each team. So you could have autoloaders on one side and then pure super heavies on the other. Now, this might not be bad depending on the map, but it is usually bad overall because they are not the same tank. As much as, yes, it is a heavy tank, that is not the same tank overall in the role that it plays. So now what they're going to do is match up mouse against the 100. So if it's a super heavy tank, it should be matched up against a super heavy tank. Now, there are problems with this because not everybody is going to be playing a super heavy tank. And then what is that going to then get matched up against to suffice about the queue times and everything else? And I don't really know the answer to working this out, other than maybe looking at the tanks individually. They've already said that this is purely just testing at this stage and making sure that they iron everything out. So maybe that's what they will do. But there's definitely no point doing a support heavy tank against a super heavy tank. It just won't work. Now, better class diversity. This is going to make it so there is a maximum of 5 tank destroyers and 3 light tanks per team. Now, I don't really think that 3 light tanks per team is good. There's no map in the game that needs 3 light tanks, and it creates unneeded competition within your own team for the spots. For example, if you have a composition on your team of an EBR, an RHM, and a Manticore, what is the RHM meant to do? Because the EBR will just go around getting all the active spots, and the Manticore is just going to go and sit in a bush somewhere getting all the passive spots. The RHM is then big, fat, and kind of useless. Then it goes into a damage dealer role, I guess. So I think that, yeah, 3 light tanks is a little bit too much, and no map really needs more than 2. A thought that I actually had when this first came out, and what I kind of had in the back of my mind for a while now, and I might have said it on the stream, is that you could limit the amount of light tanks based on the map that it is. So for example, Prokhorovka, you could have 2 light tanks. And then for, say, Himmelsdorf, you would have 1 light tank. But that's just going to then create more light tanks that would go onto good maps, and then marks would go up overall, and I think that it would then maybe have an imbalance. So I'm not 100% sure on that, and I don't think that that would work. The maximum of 5 tank destroyers, I think, is fine for the majority of maps. It really depends on what the tank destroyers are, though, because it's such a wide range, and I know that they're going for the class role stuff, but if you had like 5 FVs versus 5 FVs, that's going to be horrible. So I do think that they would then maybe need to limit it with what the tank destroyers are in the role, if that makes sense as well, because otherwise you could end up with 5 sniper TDs against 5 sniper TDs, and it really does make the maps almost unplayable sometimes. I think a healthy mix would be 2 or 3 sniper tank destroyers, and then the rest being assault style tank destroyers. I think that would be a nice balance overall. Now, there is one more thing in here that they didn't mention: artillery. I don't know why we still can have 2 artillery per game. 1 artillery should be the maximum, and if that meant that I would get 1 artillery basically guaranteed in each of my games, I would take that over sometimes having 2 artillery or 3 artillery in my game. In my opinion, if they reworked the missions, removed the stun, and made it just 1 artillery per team, that would be perfect. But that is not going to be the opinions of everyone, so I'll just leave it at that. There is going to be a focus on more +1, -1 tier battles. Now, +2, -2 hasn't been removed. Let me make that very clear. It is just less likely that you will get it. And there is now an emphasis on getting those +1, -1 games. In my opinion, +2 shouldn't exist. +2, -2 is just dumb for many reasons. But +2 games, when you're top tier and you feel like you're just a complete god, especially when you're a heavy tank, the heavy tank distribution is so bad when you're top tier and you see a tier 8 at tier 10, for example. It's just horrible. The tier 8s can't really do anything against you. And half the time at tier 10, you can 3 to 4 shot them and they just sit there and there's nothing they can do. It's not a challenge for the person that is top tier, and it's not fun for the person that is bottom tier. So honestly, +2 I think is way too much and should just be outright removed, but that's my opinion overall. Another thing that I'd like to bring up just on the +2 kind of statement is that balancing is also an issue when +2 is still in the game. Because a lot of the time when you are bottom tier, there's nothing you can do against a tier 10. As I said with the heavy tanks, a lot of the time the heavy tanks will have around about, on tier 8, around about 250 to 260 pen for the premium rounds. That is sometimes not even enough to pen the weak spots at tier 10. And while I'm definitely not saying that all tier 9 tanks can be penned with 250 pen, because sometimes that's not the case as well, it is a lot more balanced if they never see tier 10. Another thing that I want to bring up regarding this is that how does this affect preferential premium tanks? Because they already get +1, -2, but what is this going to do? Does this mean that they are more of the time going to be in that +1 game than ever seeing the -2 game? In which case then, that's fine, I think, overall, but they should probably be the same tier and -1 if this was going to go into the game fully. So preferential premium tanks will have to be adjusted for this, because that is basically giving every single premium tank at the moment preferential premium tank features. Yes, I know that preferential premium tanks are +1, -2, but hopefully you see the point. Smarter vehicle distribution, and this is something I don't really know how they're going to do it without affecting the speed and efficiency of the matchmaker, because this will limit the amount of identical tanks per team. So going into the fact of the 5 tank destroyers thing, where I said that ideally it'll be 3 sniper tank destroyers and then 2 assault tank destroyers or something like that, is this what they're planning on doing? Not necessarily, because you could have 5 tank destroyers that are all different but all sniper tank destroyers. So yeah, I feel like this is going to be a bit of an issue for them to actually try and adjust, especially after the DBV's just been added into the game, where lots and lots of people are playing the DBV. In fact, the DBV has been played 2.1 million times in the past 30 days, but you also have the FV and the Gorilla 15, which are very high up as well. Yeah, you see the problem with this? So yeah, I don't really know if that's going to work, to be honest with you. And they've also then said that further down here that all of the rules can change depending on how long the queue time is taking. And I think that this will be one of the first ones that go out the window if they can't find decent games fast. Which, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's going to be a big issue regarding this, because over time it's going to settle down. There'll be less DBVs in the game, but I don't think that it's going to settle down anytime soon. I think that this will settle down in like 3 months' time or so long down the line that then people start forgetting about it and they'll want to play other tanks. So this will be quite interesting to see how this all turns out. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Smarter and faster dynamic queue management. As I just said, it will fine-tune the parameters on the fly. Instead of having fixed settings, player distribution and vehicle availability, it will all be adjusted on the fly. So if stuff like there's so many DBVs in the game that you need to put 3 on each team, it'll probably end up doing it. This is what I'm a little bit worried about, is that it will just go back to its old ways. And that's honestly my biggest fear with all of this, is that because of the way that stuff is balanced at the moment, will it actually find a balanced game with the vehicles that are in the queue? And then they go on to just saying that this is the new Matchmaker in testing. Over the next few months, we'll carry out a series of tests on the EU1 server. So if you don't want to participate in any of this, go to EU2, 3, 4, whatever, and then play there. Encounter, assault, and ground battles will be disabled on EU1 while the tests are going on. Now, one thing that's not said in here, though, is about dynamic events and the tested maps. And I would assume that they're not going to be in this. Just purely if they're going to remove a counter assault and ground battles, I don't see why they would still allow dynamic events to happen as well, because it is kind of its own separate matchmaker in its entirety as well. So for now, it is just standard battles that you can play on EU1. Maybe dynamic events, who knows? I don't know until Wargaming confirms it. If I get any information, I'll put it in a pinned comment, whether it's confirmed or not. So overall, the matchmaker changes. This is perfect. This is something that I've been wanting for a very, very long time. And hopefully they do work how they say they're going to work, and we can have more balanced games overall. However, one thing that I will say, balancing the game, the matchmaker is only partly responsible. The maps, on the other hand, are a big factor as well. So it would be very, very nice for them to have a look into the maps as well. And I get that this is probably a completely different department and stuff like that. So I'm not really expecting anything anytime soon, but it would be nice if the maps can be taken a look at as well. Because if they can somehow make the maps and the matchmaker talk to each other, then that is going to be a perfect balance of everything. But again, I don't know how they would work that out without having like rarity of different maps depending on the class that you're playing. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.